Toe, and I'm the president of the Friends of the Milford Town Library. How many of you have gone to one of our programs before? Okay, so there are some new people here, which is good, so then I will tell you what the Friends do, just in case you don't know. So we are a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization that provides and supports the activities of the library that are not covered in the library's budget. And so some of the things that we do is to present adult programming, children's programming. If you happen to park in the parking lot right next to the library, you'll see the beautiful park that we have there, the Leonard Hill Memorial Park and Garden that's there as well. We, the Friends, were a huge sponsor of that renovation of the park. It's a multi-year program project, actually. And we also maintain the Paul Curran Memorial Historical Room upstairs as well. So we do a variety of things. Tonight we have a very nice program, but before we start the program, I want to let you know of some of the things that are coming up. This Saturday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we have Dr. James Buckley, who is a local history columnist, and he'll speak about the various U.S. presidential assassination attempts. It happens to be a timely subject, I guess, throughout our nation's history. And then on Saturday, October 5th, at 2 p.m., we have Sean Gaskell, and he will present a musical performance on a 21-stringed West African harp, which is known as the kora. Now, we have several other programs coming up in October as well, but I do want to point out, including the book sale that's coming up. It's a 2-day event, Friday, October 26th, which is only for members of the Friends, and Saturday, October 27th, which is for the public. If you are interested in joining the Friends, I'm going to be in the back there. A membership is $15 for an individual membership, and if you do take out a membership, you're able to go to the preview of the book sale that last weekend in October. In November 7th, we are having a fused glass workshop. It's a hands-on program. This program will be here, but we are charging a materials fee. It's $20 for non-members and $10 for members. If you're interested in signing up, I'll be in the back again for the whole program. But tonight, we present local author Bob Ainsworth. He's a Boston College alum, CPA, CFO, and controller, as well as a writer. During his financial career, he uncovered several embezzlement schemes. The idea for writing mystery fiction arose from his accounting students' reactions to his fraud cases and from thinking about retirement. Please join me in welcoming Bob Ainsworth, presenting The Heist. Has anyone seen $500 million in art lying around Boston?
Thanks. Oh, I thought I saw more coming in. How you all doing? Thank you for coming out. I was saying I did one of these where one person showed up. It was Dave. So Dave sat over there.
Oh, you remember him?
Oh yeah, no, well, I won't say what town it was, but yeah, so Dave showed up, and he was very interested. His dad was a painter, and so he was really interested in this for that. And so I was just like, fine, he's here. I drove all the way to, I won't say the place where I drove all that way, and so I gave him the presentation, and he was happy. And I did one of these once at a bookstore, and 2 people showed up. It was a couple. And so I get to the end, and the wife takes off, and the husband is sitting there. And he's like, oh, she always does that. I was just like, well, why? He said, well, I'm a professional trainer for presenters. And when I go to one of these things, I stay behind and I critique whoever I just listened to. So she boogies out because she doesn't want to sit there for this whole thing. I was just like, okay, fine, so how did I do? He goes, well, actually, you did fine. He said, I really don't have anything bad to say. It's like, all right, well, thank you. But, I mean, it's sort of an odd hobby, right? Showing up at presentations and saying, hey, the thing you did was horrible. But whatever.
Give you a few pointers.
Yeah, no, I seem to be able to do this okay. Like she said, I was a teacher, taught accounting and finance at night, and when we had kids and we were broke, And so, getting up and doing this isn't a big deal. Sort of the short story, so I've written, 4 books. And I wrote one, and I had a character called Uncle Louie. And Uncle Louie is just what you would picture, right? Sort of a hitman, nose sideways like that. And a friend of mine said, look, I really love Uncle Louie, you need a book about him. So I was just like, all right, so I'll write a book about him. And I tried to think of the biggest crime in Boston, because everything I write is based around here. And I thought of like the Da Vinci Code, right? Massive story, Catholic Church, the whole deal. Well, so the biggest crime clearly in Boston is the Gardner theft. So I said, all right, I'll make it a prequel, and I'll set the things in motion through that. And so I wrote the book, and he really liked it. And he said, you ought to do presentations about it. He said, as a matter of fact, I called the Gardner Mass, not the Isabel. He said he called the Gardner Mass Museum and booked me without telling me and said, you've got 6 weeks to put a presentation together, which I could do. I mean, I knew enough. I had researched this time to write the book. So that's what started this whole thing. And I've done, 40 or 50 of these. I'm starting to do presentations on Charles Ponzi and Bernie Madoff and scams like that. And so, they're just sort of fun, and I make a little bit of money that pays for the books, because I only make like $3 a book, and I haven't sold all that many. So, this sort of pays for all my costs. So that's sort of how I got here. I never wrote anything before this. I like to read, when I was a kid and still, so I like history and mysteries. So like the last history book I read was about James Buchanan. And I like mysteries. The old Perry Masons. I read all those as a kid, and they're still on TV. So, with Raymond Burr and all. So anyway, so I just figured, maybe I could write, and I started writing, and it turned out I could pump out volume. Like I could write. It wasn't very good, but if you can't even do volume, then you can't be good later. So I could do it. So I took classes and joined things, and I just keep going. So I've got 4. I'm working on 5 and 6 right now at the same time, and this is what I do. It's like 2-3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Takes about a year to put a book out. So that's the deal. So this thing, so I get you guys home before midnight. What I would like you all to do, and not everybody does it, but I'll ask you to do it because it makes the whole experience a lot better. If you could all just relax and close your eyes. Just sit, close your eyes. So I want you to picture yourself hovering over the city of Boston. Below you is a rectangle building. In the middle of it is a skylight. It's March 18th, 1990. About 1 a.m. Towards the end of winter. If you look straight ahead from where you are, you can see the Fens. Off to your left, you can see Fenway Park, the Citgo sign. If you look off to your right, you can see the Museum of Fine Arts, Northeastern. If you go straight ahead, you see the Fens, Storrow Drive, Charles River, MIT. There's a road to the left of that building. It's a one-way street going towards the Fens, towards the Charles. It's not very well lit, sort of amber-colored lights, street lights. On the side of the building is a little bump out, like an entrance, a side entrance, an employee entrance. And about 100 feet away from the Fens, away from that bump out, is a car. And 2 men are sitting in it. The car is running. The driver is a little taller, the passenger is a little shorter. And they're just sitting there. All of a sudden they hear some people from behind them singing Irish songs, St. Patrick's Day songs. St. Patrick's Day just ended an hour ago. And they're coming up the street, kind of drunk, singing songs. And they get to the side of the car. And one of the girls looks in and she sees the left arm of the driver. And there's a patch on it. It's a Boston police patch. She's like, oh my God, we got to get out of here. We're going to get busted. They're underage. So they scoot away towards Simmons College, and that's the last they're heard of. The men don't react at all. A minute or two later, that side door opens up for a second, flash of light comes out, and then the door is shut. Nobody goes in or out, it's just the door opens, door shuts. The men sit there. At about 20 after 1, the driver puts the car in gear. Slowly glides up where he's opposite that side entrance. The two of them get out. They're in full Boston police officer uniforms. The pointed hat, the gold down the stripe of their pants. They go up to the side entrance. Hey, let us in. We hear there's been a disturbance. They get buzzed in. Now they're in a little glass enclosed area. They show their badges. They get buzzed in again. Off to their right is a counter. A man sits behind him. Sort of a hippie looking guy. Beard, long hair. Hey, can you come over here? We want to talk to you. He comes out from around the counter. Where's your partner? Because there's always 2 guards on duty at night. Oh, he's doing his rounds. Call him on your walkie-talkie. So he calls him. The partner comes down. The cops grab the 2 guys. They smash them up against the wall. They take their wallets. We know who you are. You talk about this and there's going to be trouble. This is a robbery. They handcuff the guys. They duct tape them. They take them down to the basement. The cops don't miss a step. They don't take a wrong turn. They know exactly where they're going. They take one guy to one end of the basement and hook him up to some pipes. They take the other guy to the other end of the basement and hook him up to pipes. This has taken 20 minutes. These guys are not in a hurry. And the reason they're not in a hurry is they know nobody's going to come and disturb them. So for the next hour, they go back upstairs to the 2nd floor. And they go in the Dutch room. And they start taking paintings off the wall. They're breaking frames. They're razor blading paintings out of the frames. One of the guys goes around the courtyard that's under that overhead light. He takes some things from there. He comes back once to help the guy in the Dutch room, and he goes back and finishes and come back. They're at this for over an hour. The only floor they go on is the 2nd floor. They don't go in the 1st floor or the 3rd. They take all their things down to where that counter was, where they went in the first place. They take a frame, a busted frame, and they put it on the chair of the security director, sort of as a gotcha. There's a tape that records all the movement in the Gardner. They take that. There's a video. There's a camera that points outside to the street, and then it points to that counter. They take that tape. Then they go down and they check on the 2 guards. They're still where they should be. They come back up. Takes them 2 trips, in, out, in, out. They take the 13 items and put them in their car. They drive up that road called Palace Road, and then they're gone. Now you can open your eyes. So that's the theft. That's what happens step by step. That's what we know. So I'm going to tell you a lot more. I'll tell you about Isabella, how she collected everything. I'll tell you who did it. That's really easy. You have to sort of think of this in 3 levels. There's the guys who went in, there's the guys who set them up, and then there's the guys who handled the stuff after it got up through the chain. So we know all the way up to there. After that, it gets a little foggy where the stuff is. Okay? So that's the Dutch room on the 2nd floor. So I'll stay out of your way so you can see stuff. So there's the courtyard I was talking about. That's the tapestry room. They went in there for 1 second and then came out. But this is all the destruction they did. Okay? The guy who went around the courtyard, he went down this way and up to the other side. So these guys were not art lovers. They were clearly thieves, right? They were trying to take stuff. They weren't going to take it home and, you know, sit and admire it. They just wanted stuff. They wanted didn't matter to them if they busted frames or not. So Isabella is the one who created this museum. She came from New York, very wealthy father. She was very concerned about her image. So last year, my wife Pat and I went to a presentation at the Gardner. And so there aren't a lot of photos of her. There are more sketches and paintings. So she could sort of control what she looked like, which is fine, you know, she wanted to do that. So this is her as a teenager. That's her engagement picture to Jack Gardner. He was a wealthy guy from the North Shore of Boston. This is a picture of her with their son Jackie. Unfortunately, he passed pretty soon after he was born. She had one other miscarriage, and that was the end of them trying to have a family. So after that, that's when they started traveling. And they went to China and Europe and just collected all sorts of things. This is her in '88. So it's a little hard to see. This is her on a ladder.
Oh.
So it's not like she wrote a check and said, "Hi, put up a building for me," right? She was there all the time. So as a matter of fact, if you go to the Gardner now, everything is exactly where she put it back in the 1900s when she created the museum, which leads to some problems, but we'll get to that later. She was also a little quirky, right? So this is her spiritualist phase, right? You can see the veil and all that. And this is her later in life. So this is the famous picture of her by John Singer Sargent. That's, and by the way, you should all go to the Gardner if you haven't. I mean, it's a stunning place to go. This doesn't do it justice. I mean, the red and the gold there, and the real one just pops out. It's amazing. So these two were done by a guy named Anders Zorn. And you see that headdress she has on? It's all diamond tipped. Okay, so when I say she had a lot of money, she really did have a lot, and you'll see how much she had, I'll tell you. So this is a picture of her. Again, it's a sketch. This is from the Boston Globe at the time. So she borrowed Rex the lion from the Franklin Park Zoo and walked him up Boylston Street. Right? Boston Globe, 1897. So she was quirky, and she liked doing these sort of things. And so she drank beer, smoked cigarettes, played the backgammon. You know, remember, this is 1880s, 1890s. You know, obviously women didn't have the right to vote till 1917. So she was sort of out there for her time. And as somebody said, she's a millionaire bohemian, the eccentric, the leader with a smart set. She had a lot of artists and other and musicians, people who stayed around her that she supported. So just sort of in highlights. So she, you know, came from a wealthy dad. They got married. The son started collecting art. Her dad died and left her 1.8 million, which is 78 million today. No, it gets better. Then Jack died and left her 22.7, which is 102. So she had the equivalent of $180 million to play with. Okay, so that's how she could buy all this stuff and put up the building. They had started planning the museum before he died, and obviously she just kept going, right? You know, it was her vision of what she wanted to do. It opened in '03. She lived on that 4th floor. Right now it's administrative offices. You can't go up there. There's a couple of thousand pieces of art up there that you will never ever see. No one will ever see. And I'll tell you why, but not yet. And then she died, and she left 1.2 million to the museum, which seems like a lot of money, but it wasn't, because she had a will, and there were things in her will that controlled how they spent the money. So this is where she and Jack lived, on this side on Beacon Street, and then her dad built this one, and Jack, her husband, built this one. So it's sort of down near the public garden, right? And then when she moved into the museum, she lived on the 4th floor. That side entrance where the cops went in, that was her personal entrance. She sold it to a member of the Draper family, and that person knocked everything down. So there's a little plaque. So that's what's there now, and there's a little plaque that says this is where she lived. But this is where they had all their stuff before she had the museum to put everything into. So just in case, you know, you can't really tell. So there's the Gardner, right? Here's the Fenway Park. The MFA is over here. Here's that road, Palace Road. So just a bigger view. There's the Fenway. Okay, everybody recognizes Whitey territory, South Boston. So I'm going to ask you to remember three things. So I want you to remember Palace Road, so stick that in your head. I want you to stick this in your head. It's in Dorchester, a place called TRC Auto Electric. And it will be clear why that's important, but that's number two. The third thing I want you to remember is the city of Revere, which is about 6 miles north. So Palace Road, TRC, and Revere. So the Gardner, if you've been there, you know, it's a courtyard, 4 things around it, 4th floor, the skylight overhead. Everything in there, the floors, the ceilings, the fireplaces, everything is things that she shipped. So it's not like, you know, this place that has, you know, just walls and they hang. Everything there is something you need to look at. And she's, as a friend of hers said, if she inherited money, she'd have a house and fill it with objects and let people come and see it. And that's what she did. She put up a museum to do that. So this is a hotel in Venice that was sort of an inspiration for the building. There's another building that she liked. And she liked it so much that you see those balconies? 8 of those are in the Gardner. Like she took them apart, put them on a ship, and they came over here. So, you know, here's what the, you know, the courtyard looks like. If you can see back here, there's the 2 chairs that are under an empty frame right there. So this is the courtyard, this is the hallway that the one guy took to come around to go to the short gallery. So here's what the Fenway looked like before she was going, right? It wasn't a great part of area. It was sort of swampland. Not many people lived out there. It wasn't very desirable. But then she puts her thing up, and it's that, right? And all of a sudden, this is a good area. She cleans up the fens, and people start building houses there. So the big question to me is, why could 2 people get in? What made the Gardner such an easy place to rob from? And unfortunately, it has to do with her will. So here's the first part of her will. She gave $1.2 million, but they could only spend the income. So if you do some quick math, say 10%. 10% of 1.2 is $120,000. You can't run a museum on $120,000. It's just not possible. The place was broke. The other part of it was they had people on the board of directors who were not great fundraisers. So I don't know if any of you are on a board of directors, but you have 3 jobs. Write a check, get other people to write checks, and go to board meetings. And if you do the first 2, you don't have to go to meetings. So it's mostly money, but the people who were on the board at that time weren't good fundraisers. So the place was really in horrible shape. And part of it was the bad security. The other thing is that she said, and I'll just summarize that. She said, if you take anything in the museum, one piece, and move it from where I put it, then you have to sell everything in the museum. You have to sell the museum, and all the money goes to Harvard. So that's why the frames are back up, right? Because that's the best they can do in terms of staying within her will. But nothing can be moved. So when I said that 4th floor where she used to live has thousands of pieces of art, that's why they can't display them. And they're just going to sit there. They know what's there. It's administrative offices. I mean, they've got an inventory for it, but never going to get shown. So the conditions at the Gardner were pretty bad. That camera that I told you about that was taking a picture of the street, there was no backup. So they take the tape, gone. The guards were minimum wage, old men and hippies. Literally. Literally. And there was no auto alarm. So normally in a place, you know, the guards go here, they go here. If they're not on time or if their path is broken, alarms should go off. The Boston cops should show up. Something should happen. Didn't exist. So that's why the 2 cops who came in knew they weren't going to get disturbed because they knew the alarm system. So what was taken? So there were 13 items taken. So there's this little thing, the concert by Vermeer. And, you know, I've got some numbers up here that's worth $250 million, but who knows, right? It could be worth $500 million. There's this Rembrandt, Storm of the Sea of Galilee, 100 million. There's this, which is what I put on the cover of my book. That's, for some reason, I keep finding it as 10 million, but it's a Rembrandt. I'm sure those, none of these numbers are real hard numbers. There's this, which is Chez Tortoni by Manet, and I can't even find a value for it. It's just priceless. There's this, Landscape with Obelisk by a guy named Flink. For the longest time, they thought it was a Rembrandt because he was a student of Rembrandt. But again, another priceless item. And then there's this. So this is a 2x2 little sketch that he did of himself. 2x2, postage stamp size. And $250 million. That's what when you look, it's just these crazy numbers for this stuff. So, when I started this thing with, has anybody seen $500 million lying around in art? No, it could be $1 billion. Seriously, it could be $1 billion for the things they took. So there's more. So this is the room. So that's where Lady and Gentleman in Black was. That's where Storm of the Sea of Galilee was. So you see that little white spot there? There was a vase there. It's called a goo or a coup. Okay? The Vermeer, the concert, was there. And Flake's obelisk was on the back side, so they were, back to back. This was not taken, although they tried to get it, but it was screwed into the wall, and it was just too much effort. But that little sketch it's called Three Mustaches, Trois Moustaches, because it sort of looks like he has three mustaches. That was right there, just on the side. So they just sort of grabbed that one. And that's the corridor going down to the other area. So there's the flank and there's the corridor. So here's the short gallery. It's not much bigger than, like a walk-in closet. Okay? And there's, 6, 7, 8 of these doors with things on the back. This is Napoleon's flag, and it's on a staff. And on top of that staff was an eagle called a finial. They took that eagle from back in there. So they go all the way to the other side of the museum, go to this one little room, and take this eagle off a staff. Odd choice. The other odd choice is they take 5 sketches by Degas, and Degas, it's fine, but why do you take those 5 sketches? And they're like on the back of one of these doors. So this is the eagle, number 1, because it's the 1st regiment. So this is the only item that's ever been seen. And we know it's been seen because 2 years ago, a guy who was a jeweler on Washington Street said a couple of months after the theft, somebody walked in with that eagle wrapped in cloth and said, "How much is this worth? What can I sell it for?" And the guy said, "Why didn't you just steal the Mona Lisa?" The guy who came in with it was a guy named Bobby Donati. It's like, might as well steal the Mona Lisa because nobody's going to buy this stuff from you because what are they going to do with it? It's too hot. So this guy, Bobby Donati, rolled it back up, left, and that's the only thing of any of the 13 that's ever been seen. But these are the Degas sketches. They're sort of funny, 3 of them are of jockeys and horses. So this is what she paid for everything. So I'll leave that there for a second. But you can see the total isn't very big. She paid a lot for that vase. She paid a lot for the Rembrandt. Look at what she paid for the Vermeer. Now remember, this was 1880s, 1890s, 2000s, 1900s. But she's not paying a lot. Like that little the sketch, the 2x2, paid $120 for it. That's how things were valued at the time. So, like I said, I was an accountant, so I sort of like, accounting details and documents and things. So that is her receipt for the Chez Tortoni. This is right up in there. This is the receipt for shipping the Degas. Right there it says Degas, and they're shipping them. This is an inventory of things they had in France. So there's a Rubens and there's a Rembrandt. This is her paying the $120 for the Rembrandt Trois Moustaches. I just do this to amuse myself. Because I'm retired, I might as well, so why not? That's her receipt for the Vermeer, right? So right up there, it says Vermeer, the concert. This is her receipt for buying Napoleon's flag. I couldn't find a receipt for the eagle. This is her receipt for another different Rembrandt. And this is her personal check from State Street Bank for half of that vase. So I just thought it was kind of funny, you find a personal check from somebody that, cleared through the banking system. So why were those things taken? So when I did this part of this presentation, I was down in Chatham, and a woman was standing back there, and I get through this part, and she yells out, "You're wrong," which is entirely possible, right? I'm just a guy, I've researched stuff. As best I can tell, this stuff is true, but it's not like, I'm investigating. So afterwards, I go up, and I introduce myself, and, I said, "So why do you think I'm wrong?" She said, "Well, my husband was a hitman for the mafia, and he said that all the stuff was spoken for ahead of time. So that's why they picked those individual things." And I looked her up, and then I looked her husband, and she was who she gave me her name, and she was who she said she was, and he was who she said he was. So that's one possibility. Now by the way, you have to think of this theft like the Kennedy assassination in terms of there's never been a trial, there's never been evidence presented, nobody's ever been charged. So it's just a lot of theories, right? Who killed Kennedy? I don't know, 10, 20 different ways. Who did this? Fewer, but still a lot of different possibilities. So I was in the hospital, 5, 6 years ago, and I had a nice roommate, and we got to talking, and he's like, "So, what do you do?" And I tell him, and I'm working on this book about the gardener, and he starts laughing at me. His name's John. I'm like, "John, why are you laughing at me?" He said, "Well, if I tell you, I'll have to kill you." But I'm in a hospital, so, if he tries to kill me, they'll revive me. So for 3 days, I keep bugging him, like, John, come on, tell me, why won't you tell me? He says, "I can't." I say, "Fine." So I get to the last day, I go around the curtain, I sit on his bed, and I'm just like, "John, you gotta tell me why you're laughing." He said, "Fine." He said, so he was a Korean War vet, worked his way up from being a bouncer to a short order cook to a cook, and eventually owning a restaurant. And his partner in the restaurant was Whitey Bulger.
Oh.
That was a nice restaurant, not like the Triple O's or the other places he hung out. And he said, "I'm telling you, Whitey did it." So this lady's telling me the mafia did it. This guy is telling me that Whitey did it. Tons of different theories. I like this theory. So this is the guide. I actually bought it just the other day. So here's the guide, 1984 guide. And I found this way deep somewhere in Reddit or something. Anyway, this thing has a theory that says the items that are pictured in that guide are the ones that were stolen. And it's not a bad theory, because here's the coup, here's the Rembrandt, this is the Flink, right? This is pictured, right? That's the concert. That's Lady and Gentleman in Black. All of those are pictured in that guidebook. So it's almost like somebody said, "Here, you go to Stop and Shop and get this. And you go, to Hannaford's and get this stuff, and we'll meet downstairs and then we'll try and sell it, or I don't know what we'll do with it. We'll hang it in our bedroom or something." But I love that theory because it's really simple. There's a little more to it than that. So that Chez Tortoni, which is it's pretty small. When you look at the Blue Room, so the Blue Room was on the first floor. And if you remember, when I told you to close your eyes, I didn't say anybody went to the first floor. I said they went to the basement and the second. This is the only thing that's pictured for the Blue Room, and it was stolen. So the only thing for that room is that, and somebody stole it. I just kind of like it as a very simple explanation of why was this stuff stolen. So what wasn't taken? There was that Rembrandt that was on the wall. That was pictured in the guide. There's this by Rubens that was in the guide, but it was on the 3rd floor, and it was probably too far for them to go. And then there was this by Titian, which is gigantic, so they didn't take that. And the gardener at one point had the 14, there's 4 of these. They're done for the King of Spain, and the 4 of them together are worth $1 billion. And so they didn't take this just because maybe it was too big. Who knows? And it was on the 3rd floor too. So maybe they just got lazy. Or they had a list. So there were other attempts to get into the gardener. I'll tell you about that. Stuff that happened the day before the theft. After the theft, I'll tell you who did it, where did the stuff go, and then I wrote a book, so I had the fictional ending, so I'll tell you that. But it's a fun ending. I like it. So, a decade before the actual theft, the FBI had a plant, an undercover guy, and he learned that there was going to be an attempt to steal from the gardener. So they went to the museum and they told the security director what was going to happen. My first presentation of doing this, the security director who was in that meeting was in the room. He was sitting there, and he came up to me and told me about this. It was pretty cool. But they told them, there's like, you're going to get robbed. They changed some stuff. Nothing happened. But people were looking at this thing at least a decade before it happened. 2 weeks before the theft, 2 guys went to the back of the Museum of Fine Arts. Hey, let us in. We hear there's been a disturbance. The guard at the MFA says, I can't let you in. I have to go talk to my boss. He goes looking for his boss. The MFA is gigantic. It takes him 8 years to find his boss. By the time he gets back, the 2 guys are gone. But a couple of months before the theft, 2 guys in uniforms tried to talk their way into the gardener. Into the MFA and failed. Also, the MFA didn't tell the cops, and they didn't tell the gardener. They kept it a secret that somebody had tried to bust it. Well, very neighborly of them. 2 weeks before the theft, a guy is on that Palace Road getting beat up by 2 other guys. He breaks free, goes to the side door. Let me in, I'm getting beat up. The guard says, I can't let you in. He walks away, gets in the car with the 2 guys who were beating him up, and the 3 of them drive away together. Okay, another attempt to get into the gardener 2 weeks ahead. It gets better. The night before the theft, 3, maybe 4 people were let into the gardener that night. And we know because that camera was working. And they didn't steal the tape from the 17th. They stole the tape from the 18th. And the FBI released this tape. So we can see the people going in and out. So if you care, and it's hard to watch, and it's really dark, but if you go to fbi.gov, if you want to take a picture of that, you can. If not, I'll keep going. But you can go look at this tape. It's incredible. But you have to have all the lights out, right? Your eyeballs have to get gigantic. but it's if you're interested, it's worth it. But so to save you from doing that, I took screenshots. Okay? So March 17th, a little before 1 a.m. Remember I said old men and hippies? There's the old man. So he's one of the guards. The night before the theft. He was not on the night of the theft. He called in sick. Here's the regular guard. Remember I said the hippie? I was being literal. So here he is on the phone right after this. So his name is, I've never learned this guy's name. This guy's name is Richard Abath. He passed away 2-3 months ago. He was the security guard who opened that door. Remember I said the door? He's the one who opened that door. He's the one who buzzed everybody in. He's the one who they've looked at as an inside job. But he's passed lie detector tests. He's never been charged. He never had great wealth. He was a school teacher up in Vermont. He was just a moron that day. Or other days too. Because there were a lot of, he would have weed parties in the MFA. Have his all friends in and they would just smoke and do whatever. Okay? 4810, so this is 4719. A minute later, this is a car backing up on that Palace Road. And it stops opposite that entrance, the employee entrance. So the car comes backing in, stops. The old guy takes a hike. The car's parked, all the lights are off. It's hard to see, but see the legs there? This is a guy, I call it a guy because you can't tell by his color. So this is a guy walking towards the side entrance just before 1 a.m., 24 hours before the theft. Here's the hippie hitting the buzzer, letting the guy in. So that's one person that let in, at least. Here's the guy going in, 4918, right there. And here at 4925, for some reason he went in, and 7 seconds later, he's walking back from the gardener to his car. What he did in 7 seconds, like go in, wave, hi, how's life? You know, they don't, Abeth never has explained what was going on. So there's somebody going out. Now the car lights are on. So this guy is sitting in the car. There's another guy right here. Right here, see him?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So car's on, 4939, there's a guy there. So there's one guy here, he went in and out. There's another guy here, he's going in. Nobody should be going in, right? Here he is, 4947, there's the guy. And then you hardly see anything for 3 minutes. And then here's the guy again. And here he is walking through. So at 5300, he's walking in this way. So I don't know how to count, right? It's one guy in, another guy in, this guy, it's, I don't know, is it 3 or 4? It's hard to tell. You don't see faces, and nobody knows their identity. At 5310, see 5300, he's going in. 5310, somebody's coming out. So who's this guy? Right? And the car is on. 5330, the car takes off. Nobody else got in the car because the doors didn't open, you didn't see the internal lights on. And then that's it. So that's like 3-4 people in the garden who should never have been there at all. Now, on August 10th, 2015, a lawyer who used to be the Norfolk County DA, his name was George Burke, he said one of his clients knows who was in that video. But he doesn't want to say anything because he thinks he'll be killed if he identifies that person. So Burke gave the name of that guy who went in and out to the U.S. attorneys. And they've never done anything. So either it didn't pan out, or who knows. But nobody's ever been charged. They've never identified who it is, except that this guy said that one of his clients knows. And he says his client used to work with 2 guys named Connor and Youngworth, who we will get to. So March 18th, I told you about the partiers. The car that was being driven was a 1988 red Dodge Daytona hatchback. It's not like they had a gray Toyota, of which there's like 8 billion in the world. They had a red Dodge Daytona hatchback. Easy to spot. I told you about the guards and the theft. The discovery happened the next morning when the next shift came on. So here's the statements from the partiers. And, you know, they didn't see much. They saw the patch. This woman here says that the driver did not look like the sketches that were drawn from the security guard's view. So she's almost saying there was a third person, like somebody driving, somebody as a passenger, and somebody else was in the car, but why weren't they seen? And so the cops took their statements and said, it's nice, thanks for coming, but you were drunk, so what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And they just let them go. So here's the 88 red Dodge Daytona hatchback. There's the car from the night before, the 17th, when we have the video. To me, that looks an awful lot like the same car. So it was the same car the night before as used in the theft. So here's the security guard. Remember I said old men and hippies. The old man, I don't know. So here's Richard Abath. That's him there. He had a band called Uriah. They lived at that place in Alston, Brighton. And that's where they would throw keg and weed parties. You come in, pay $5. His band's playing in the basement. You get stoned and drunk and do whatever. The second guard the night of the theft was this guy, Randy Hested. He was just called in that night. Didn't have anything to do with anything. Was just Wrong guy, wrong time. So he was the one who got called in and, on the walkie-talkie and then put down the basement. So just a quick timeline of stuff that's going on. Right, the cops show up, they talk their way in, bring everybody to the basement, start going around, grabbing all the stuff, more grabbing, and then the sensor system stops working for 15 minutes. There were sensors all in the Gardner saying when anybody passed there, they could tell. So for 15 minutes, there's no movement at all. And then it starts up again. And then it stops again. They've never been able to explain why. Maybe that's when they went to the first floor and grabbed that Chez Tortoni. Nobody knows. Maybe they went down to talk to the guards to see if they were still alive. Who knows? So then by 2:40, 2:45, they're downstairs. They're doing the stuff with the tape and da-da-da. And then Gone Baby Gone, which is, by the way, a really, really good movie and book. If you've never watched it, it's Ben Affleck and Casey Affleck, really good stuff. Anyway, So here's the side entrance, the day of the theft, right there. Here's Palace Road. And here's what it looks like today. So here's just a sketch that I stole from the Boston Globe, I think. But you can see sort of where they go in, take the guys to the basement, come up here, do stuff here, come to the short gallery, come back there, go back down, check everybody, get down here, get in the car, drive this way at Palace Road. All right, here's the gaps in the sensors. Excuse me. The only one who went in that blue room, and the blue room is where that Chez Tortoni was. The only one who went in there was Abath, the day of the theft. He went in at 12:27. He went in at 12:53. He's the only one that the sensors picked up because he was doing his rounds. And he's the one who opened that side door. He said he opened it and was checking the security on the door, which is the dumbest thing on earth. But he said he opened that door and closed it. No explanation why. So here's the tape. The only thing the fake cops didn't know was there was a backup to the paper tape. So they took the one paper tape, they took the video, but they didn't know about this one. So you can see, March 18th, 1:55, Dutch room. Someone's in the Dutch room, investigate immediately. Yeah, no kidding, you're getting robbed. But nobody is seeing this. Nobody sees this at all. It just goes and goes and goes. So here, if the technology works, and it usually does,
come in, clock in.
this is the security guard.
There would be 2 guards.
Rick Abbott was one of the night watchmen on duty the night of the crime. Until now, he'd never done a television interview about what happened that night.
Cops rang the doorbell. They said, Boston police, we got a report of disturbance on the premises. So I buzzed them in.
That decision to buzz them in is something Rick Abbott has had to live with for the past 23 years.
The cop that was dealing with me turned to me and said, don't I know you? Don't I recognize you? I think there's a warrant out for your arrest. Can you step out from behind the desk?
Here, Rick makes another grave mistake. He steps away from the security desk and away from the panic button. His only way to contact the outside world. His only way to prevent what was about to happen. In a matter of minutes, the 2 thieves had both night watchmen completely under their control.
He finished cuffing me and he cuffed my partner and very dramatically said, gentlemen, this is a robbery.
The thieves lead Rick and his partner down to the basement to different areas. Rick is taken to the boiler room and cuffed to an electrical box. His eyes and mouth were duct taped, and he feared for his life. It all happened so fast, he never had a chance to hit the one panic button by the guard desk. He knew no one was coming to help. Did the thieves know that as well? It appears they did, since they were in no rush to get out.
path is interesting. They took the guards after they handcuffed them and taped them and brought them into the basement. About 24 minutes elapsed, though, before we see them again.
Motion detectors placed throughout the building picked up their trail for nearly an hour and a half. But that didn't matter. Those motion detectors weren't connected to police outside. They only alert the guard sitting at the computer by the entrance. A computer that was now unmanned.
It's in this hallway where we see the first motion.
Come in.
So I just think that's pretty cool. So that was Anderson Cooper did that on AC 360, like in, what do you say, 23 years after, so 2013. But they reissued it about 2 months ago, and I saw it, and so I captured it and put it on there. But it's just interesting hearing him, sort of tell the stories, and he's sort of admitting he's just like a doofus. He's just like he let them in. Anyway. So here's what he looked like when he was in the basement. Yes, that is a knife back there, but that was there afterwards. There's other pictures with him with not the knife, but that's how he's tied up. So what do we know about the thieves? Well, we know from the night before there were a bunch of people in and out, although we can't see faces. We know they were in a red Dodge Daytona hatchback. We know the timeline, and the security guards, Abath and Hested, saw the two cops. So we have sketches. So here's one guy, glasses, mustache, no mustache here. This is the shorter guy, mustache, no mustache. So we have pretty good sketches, and we have descriptions. But remember, these guys thought they were going to be killed, they were scared, they make mistakes, identification of what you think you see isn't true all the time. So Abath said glasses, Hested no glasses. Hested said Boston accent. Hested said fake mustache. Abath said no mustache. So, they're getting things confused, but that's what happens, right? You're under stress, you don't remember. So who did it? Was it an inside job? Was it Abath? Was it like Pierce Brosnan or the Pink Panther or somebody, right? Right? Was it somebody like that, some international thief doing it? Maybe. Was it the Mafia? Well, which one? The Patriarchs from Providence, the Angelos from the North End, the Murrays from Charlestown, Whitey Bulger. There's a lot to choose from. It could be any or all. Okay? Or just a couple of morons. So, here's Abath. But personally, I would have lost that haircut a long time ago. But, that's his choice. So like I said, he had no sign of wealth. He was just a teacher, passed away a couple months ago. He didn't do it. If they thought he had done it, they would have charged him, and they never charged him. So they don't think it's that. There was this guy, a guy named Brian McDevitt. He was a known thief. He was living on Beacon Hill at the time of the theft, so like 2 miles away. He told his girlfriend that he'd been paid $300,000 to rob the gardener, and then he left her and went to Hollywood as a screenwriter and tried to pitch the theft as a movie. And everybody turned him down, and then he disappeared. So don't know what happened to him after that, but they sort of looked at him, but he's got a beard and the money, and the guards, neither of the guards said he looked like that. So it's not that guy. This guy, Miles Connor, any of you guys know of him? He was in my presentation in Bellingham. He came, I walked in behind him, and he's like a scruffy looking guy, almost looked homeless, and he comes in, and we're talking for a minute, he goes, I want to trade books. I'm like, what do you mean you want to trade books? He hands me his book about his life. And it was like, holy crap, this is Miles Connor. And he wanted to trade that for like my duped book. So he sat there, he talked to my wife the whole time. So I'm doing this presentation like this, and he's sitting right there. And I'm like, but I didn't nobody knew who he was, right? And I didn't identify, I gave him a look once, but that was it. Anyway, so he had a rock and roll band, but the problem was he kept getting arrested. So, he'd do the band, he'd get busted. He stole a painting. Remember the guy who had the finial? The eagle was Bobby Donati. The two of them were really good friends. Really good friends. He and Donati cased the gardener in 1974. So 17 years before the theft. He's looking at how to do it. He stole a Rembrandt from the MFA and gave it back so he wouldn't go to jail. This is more what he looks like. This was in his girlfriend's backyard, he said. He was friends with this William Youngworth, who we're going to meet in a second, but he was in jail in Lompoc, California, the day of the theft. However, before the theft, a guy who we're going to meet in a second went to him and said, "How do I rob the gardener?" And after the theft, the guy went back out to Lompoc and said, "We followed your plans and it worked."
Oh.
He also said his friend is the one who was driving that car, that the one witness said didn't look like the two guys. So he says that was his friend. He also says, remember that Chinese goo? The goo, my wife was asking him, why was that stolen? It's such an odd thing. He said, I wanted that one. They stole that from me. My wife didn't ask if he still had it, which is probably a good thing to do. So like I said, yeah, he came to Bellingham. Interesting guy. He thought I was doing the security director from the Gardner was doing this presentation. It turned out to be me, but you know, he stayed anyway. He's a nice man. He's a nice man. So here's this guy, William Youngworth. He stole paintings from Miles Connor. He was in jail a whole bunch. He owned this place called Almost Antiques, where he fenced stolen art, including the Liberace here, whatever. It's like dogs playing poker. He showed a reporter from the Herald a rolled up painting, and the reporter took some of the paint and they had it tested, and it was from the right time period, but it wasn't one of the 13. So he tried to scam to get the reward at the time, which was $5 or $10 million. Okay? He was friends with a guy named Joseph Murray, who we're going to meet in a second. So here's David Houghton. He's the guy who went out to Lompoc, California to tell Miles Connor that they did it. He dated Miles Connor's sister. He visited Connor in jail on how to do it, and then he went back and said they did. He drove the car, but he weighed 350 pounds, so he never went in. Maybe he just stayed in the car. Don't know. But he passed away in '92, so I can't ask him. Then there's this guy, Louis Royce. He's the one that was planning to rob the Gardner in 1981. That the undercover FBI agent went to the Gardner Museum and said, "You're going to get robbed." He was the one planning the robbery. And the reason he was planning the robbery was he slept in the Gardner as a kid. He found out that the man he thought was his father wasn't, and he ran away from home, and he was a street kid after that. And he would go into the Gardner, walk up to the 4th floor, go under a table where there was a tablecloth, and sleep. And then in the morning, get up and go out. And that was his routine. So he knew everything about the Gardner. So he could have robbed it. He never did, but he owned another place that fenced stolen art. He robbed a house and gave the paintings back so he wouldn't go to jail, which is what you do with stolen art when you get caught. He passed away recently. He had a really hard life, homeless, drugs, lots of stuff. But he was looked at for the Gardner theft. Or just could have been a couple of guys, right? A couple of morons, like those two in the sketches, or like him, or like him. So that's George Reisfelder. So he's the taller of the two cops. And that's Lenny the Mutt DeMuzio. And he's the shorter of the two cops. And those are the two guys who went in and did the theft. Like 99% right. That's what the FBI says. They did it. So here's George, called George Jamaica Plain. What a fancy name. Being let off to jail, being happy about it for some reason. I don't understand. Another picture of him. Guess what kind of car he owned? He owned the red Dodge Daytona hatchback that they used. He worked at TRC Auto Electric. Just hang on. His sister-in-law said she saw that Shea Tortoni in his bedroom.
Oh.
He died of a coke overdose a year after the theft. His body was discovered by a guy named Carmelo Merlino. We'll meet Carmelo in just a second. Here's Lenny the Mutt. Guess where he worked? Hey? He disappeared a year after the theft. It took him a couple of months to find his body because it was in the trunk of a car under a bridge in East Boston. And he'd been beaten to death by a guy named David Turner. So here's Turner, and he worked at TRC Auto Electric, and he's the one who allegedly beat Lenny DiMuzio to death. Here's Carmelo Merlino, handsome guy. He was a Patriarcha underboss. Guess what business he owned? Okay, TRC Auto Electric. He ran a coke ring. So the guy who found George Reisfelder overdosed on cocaine, the guy who found the body, sold cocaine. Did he kill him? I don't know. Maybe George was talking too much, and the guy tried to get it out of him and just OD'd him. He robbed the car. He exchanged paintings for jail. He was caught on a wire talking about the theft, but he never did it, and he died in 2005. So here's TRC Auto Electric. It's still there. You can get your car fixed if you like. I don't think they sell cocaine here, though. So here's everybody who worked at TRC Auto Electric. George, Lenny, Bobby Donati, right, the guy with the finial, David Turner, David Houghton, Tony Romano, he's the one who wore the wire that caught Carmelo talking about the theft, and Carmelo. All of them worked at TRC Auto Electric. So now we sort of get to the second level, right? We know the two guys who went in. So who did the planning and all the other stuff? So could it have been Whitey, right? Maybe my hospital roommate was right. Maybe it was Whitey. However, did any of you know how Whitey made his money? He got 15% of all the crime in his area. So if you robbed a bank, you gave him 15%. He also stole $1 million lottery ticket from somebody, and he also went into a liquor store and just took it over and threw the owners out. Okay? So Whitey, this seems to be too sophisticated for Whitey. He really liked, beating people up and killing them. And that was his deal. So, I don't think it was Whitey. And the other reason is Steve Fleming and Kevin Weeks were his guys. He told them to find the thieves so he could get the 15% from them. So if Whitey's doing that, he didn't do the theft, right? He just didn't. And you all know Whitey got killed in jail, right? By some of you. Any of you recognize that? Gun running to the IRA. Whitey Bulger and a guy named Charles Murray from Charlestown put the guns on that boat. Goes across the Atlantic. It gets captured. The guns get taken off by the British police. The boat comes all the way back. Everybody gets busted. So one theory is Whitey took the paintings to give them to the IRA so they could sell them to buy more guns, but that's way too complicated and just doesn't sound right. But it's a theory. Right? There's lots of theories out there. So here's Bobby Donati. He was a driver for this guy, Vinnie Ferrara. He stole paintings. He knew he was real good friends with Miles Connor. He worked at TRC. So he drove for Vinnie the Animal Ferrara. That's this guy who was very high up in the mafia under Patriarcha. He's the one who said, do you want to buy the finial? Right? That's him. He had the police uniforms. The night before the theft, he was in a bar in Revere. Remember Revere? He was in a bar in Revere showing off 2 complete Boston police officer uniforms. He had the uniforms. So more than likely, he paid George and Lenny, maybe gave him a couple $1,000, gave him the uniforms, said go in and do it. They came out. He got all the stuff, and the guys had some money. And then they get killed, probably because they were bragging about it. So here's Donati's house in Everett, which they checked and couldn't find anything. Unfortunately, like everybody else connected with this.
Oh.
So about a year after the theft, he's beaten to death on his front porch, then he's stuffed in the trunk of his car, and they hide it somewhere. And not that his death is funny, because it's not. But this part is funny. This is the cops. At this point, we have no suspects. Unfortunately, in this kind of case, not many witnesses come forward. Yeah, no kidding. You come forward, you're dead. Right? So, you know, all these guys are dead within not long after the theft. Okay, now we're going to get to the next level. These are the distribution guys. So the first one's a guy named Bobby Guarenti. He hung out at, of course, he was a father figure to David Turner. His widow said he gave some pieces to another guy named Bobby Gentile, who we'll meet in a minute. Somebody else said that he buried the stuff in the slab of a house in Orlando, Florida that he owned. They jackhammered that. There was nothing there. And he passed away in 2004. He was friends with this guy, Bobby Luisi, who was a Philadelphia mobster. So now we're starting to get more distribution. So here's Bobby Gentile. So when I did this first presentation, I was at Gardner, Mass. The director came to me and said he got the phone call. Somebody said, I think my neighbor across the street has all the stuff in his shed. The guy called the Gardner, Mass Museum instead of the Isabella Gardner Museum. But the director knew what to do. He calls the FBI. The FBI comes out. They take the tape. The next day, they are ripping this guy's house apart. And in the bottom of that shed, they find a false basement. And in that false basement was a list of the stolen items and some newspaper articles about it. Okay? And Guarenti's wife said her husband gave Gentile some of the paintings. So that's sort of some of the distribution of this. But that place, they tore that apart. Didn't find anything, and he recently passed away. Here's another guy. He bragged that he had 2 of the paintings. You know where this is going to go. Right? So he's friends with Bobby Guarenti. They're up in Maine. They decide to go down to Revere to go to a movie together. So they take 2 cars, they drive down to his place. He gets out, right, you know. He gets out of his car, he goes up to his apartment. And see this little light bulb here? That's unscrewed. So while he's fumbling with his keys to try and get into his place, Guarenti 2 shotgun blasts to the back and kills him. And it's Guarenti's wife who said Guarenti did this. He passed away, but his wife obviously was very talkative. So where's the stuff? So, I'll tell you that one when I'm done with this. So it could be in Revere with Bobby Donati, right? It could be in Maine with Guarenti. It could be in Connecticut with Gentile. It could be with Luisi down in Philadelphia, or it could be in Orlando. However, I had a woman come to one of my presentations, and she said her husband knew everybody in this theft. He was a photographer, and she saw pictures of the 13 items after they'd been stolen, that her husband had taken photographs of them. And she wanted me to help her get into the building where she said her husband, she thinks, put the stuff. So I looked up, she gave me her name, I looked her up, I looked her husband up, I looked up his businesses, and I know where that building is. But she said, I can't do anything about it. I said, I think you should go to the FBI or the Gardner. She's like, all right, well, whatever. So she's never called me or emailed me. I gave her my contact information. But I know where that building is, where she thinks the stuff is. It's in a Boston suburb. Anyway, so like I said, I get really interesting people come to this.
Yeah.
So here's what the FBI thinks. Here in the middle, we've identified the thieves, Mid-Atlantic states, that's TRC, right? After that, then they talk about Connecticut and Philadelphia. That's Gentile and Guarenti and Luisi. And then they say after that, they don't know what happened. So 2013, they sort of lose track. Where the stuff went from Philadelphia, they really don't know. So, Donati got the uniforms, he paid the guys. Then those guys get killed. Donati hides the items. Maybe there'll be a This Old House episode someday. They take down the wall and, oh my God, look, we've got the paintings. And who knows? And Guarenti and Gentile sent them to Philadelphia. So this all started with my writing a book. So when you write a book, you need an ending. And my wife comes from the North Shore of Boston, and I drove there 1,000 times. And when I had to have this is my Uncle Louie. Remember I said I had an Uncle Louie character? That's my Uncle Louie guy. Okay? So I had to put the paintings in some place at the end of my book. So there was a place I passed 1,000 times going to my wife's house. And it's this. It's called Doc Kagan's Auto Clinic. And Doc Kagan is portrayed as a doctor with the head mirror and the white coat, the whole deal, right? It's right there, North Shore. So, and there's Doc Kagan. So in my book, I put all the gardener stuff in the oil pit changing area. And that's I'm giving it away. But like, you know, if I write these books, I have to have fun. So I have fun with that. So, getting to the end. If you want to read a really good book, Steve Kirchin, Boston Globe Spotlight reporter, really nice guy. I've talked to him a bunch. Really good stuff. This is a Robbery on Netflix by Mike Barnacle's kids. Fantastic. Watch that. It's riveting. And I have more of these presentations that I'm doing if any of you guys ever want to go see more, right? And I'm in Vegas in residence with Cher for the month of November. So I've written my books. Ponzi just came out, so it's a prequel. My guy's parents lose all their money to Charles Ponzi, right? How did they stop him? This one is set on Nantucket, so it introduces my character, and he finds wine scams and other frauds on Nantucket. This one, so I created a word. I call these women doppelschwindlers instead of doppelgangers. And the two of them look exactly alike, and they run Ponzi schemes on people. So that's on the North Shore of Boston. And then, my books are in hardcover. That's the Gutenberg Bible. Paperback, needle. Yeah. And then ebook, and they're on audio. So they took my ebook and used artificial intelligence so you can listen to it. So all of these are on Amazon. They're for sale back there if you want to buy it. Other than, but wait. So you can buy stuff for sale. I think that's the right price. No? So I have the wrong prices? She'll tell you the right prices. But they're pretty close to that. I don't know. Like I said, I do the talking. So I'm on Facebook. I have a website. There's bookmarks back there if you want them. And I'm done. Thank you all for coming. So if any of you know anything, I'd really like to talk to you. Other than that, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them, or you can buy a book or whatever. Yes?
The guy who didn't show up that night,
Yeah.
what's his story?
Nothing. He was just sick that night.
Okay.
Nothing. I can't even, like I said, I looked for his name. Never identified him. He just called in sick, and they got Hested to show up instead. That was all. I don't know. And again, you guys are all going to leave. Like I said, I do a Ponzi presentation. This is Ponzi stuff, but these are the Boston police reports that were filed that day. If you want to take a look at them, if not, go home and do whatever you're going to do.
Wow.
All right?
You know that we're all critiquing percentages.
So I did. Well, I kept you all awake, right? So as long as I keep you awake.
Close your eyes.
Yeah, and you laughed at some of the right places, so then I did a good job. But thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.